morning, everyone. So my name is Jie Huang. I am an associate at Scott Legal PC. And today we are going to spend some time talking about the common questions and answers about the E-1 visa. So the E-1 visa, as many of you may know, allows entrepreneurs to come to the US to engage in international trade between the United States and their home country. So just a few things before we get started. Scott Legal is a full-service immigration law firm. Our main specialty is E-2 treaty investor visas, and we regularly process a high number of them. But we do assist individuals pursuing various types of visas, including family-based visas, employment-based immigrant visas, and a variety of non-immigrant visas, including the E-1 visa for treaty traders. And we will be continuing these webinar series, doing at least 2 webinars a month on different topics. So please feel free to keep follow us. At the end of this webinar, we will send out a few things. First, we'll be sending out a PowerPoint presentation that has all the information that will be covered in this webinar. Second, we will be sending you a comprehensive guide on the E-2 visa that you can use, the E-1 visa that you can use as a reference. Third, we will send you a link to where you can sign up for additional webinars in the future, and also a link to this webinar as it will be recorded. And the webinar will be available on YouTube. And we do encourage you to subscribe to our channel as we regularly upload new videos about immigration law topics. Finally, we will send you a link where you can follow to set up a consultation with us if that is what you wish to pursue. So today, we are very lucky to have Michaela Vrazdova, an immigration attorney at Scott Legal with a wealth of E-1 visa experience, who has helped a variety of entrepreneurs who will be answering these commonly found questions and answers about the E-1 visa. Finally, for any questions that you may have, you can add them to the chat box or Q&A section, and we will try to get to all questions. So without further delay, let us move into our questions. Good morning, Michaela.
Good morning.
Okay, so why don't we begin with the basics? Who can qualify for an E-1 visa, and how long can the E-1 visa be issued for?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. So nationals of E-1 visa treaty countries can qualify for the E-1 visa, and the Department of State has a comprehensive list on its website. We have the list on our website as well. Many countries all over the world are E-1 visa treaty countries, but countries in Europe, Latin America, Africa, Asia, many of these countries are on the list. So if you are a national of one of these countries, you could qualify for an E-1 visa. What is important to keep in mind is that the country of nationality is important, not the country of birth, because in immigration law, sometimes the benefits depend on where you were born, but for the E-1 visa, the important thing is just the country of nationality. So let's say that you were born, for example, in India, and India is not an E-1 visa treaty country, but later you became a national of, for example, Canada, and you have Canadian passport, you could qualify for an E-1 visa with the Canadian passport. And to answer the question, how long the E-1 visa can be issued for, so this will depend on your country of nationality. If you are national, for example, of Canada, or for example, a national of Italy, you could get the E-1 visa issued for 5 years. But there are countries that if you're national of certain countries, you would get the E-1 visa for a shorter period of time, such as 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years. So it will just depend on your country of nationality.
Right, thank you so much. And even if the visa itself has a short validity, for example, 6 months, once you come in, can you stay longer to develop your trade?
Yes, exactly. So even if, for example, your visa is issued only for 6 months, when you come to the US, you will be able to stay for 2 years from the date of entry. So you would still get the 2 years, but you would not be able, after the visa expires, after the 6 months, then you would not be able to travel internationally because the visa would be expired, or you would have to apply for a new visa at a consulate.
That makes sense. Okay, so why don't we go and look at a little bit more closely at the requirements to apply and be approved for an E-1 visa?
Yeah, so the first requirement, as I've already mentioned, is that you must be a national of E-1 visa treaty country. The second requirement is that there must be a trade between your home country and the US. And so what this means is that there must be an exchange of qualifying commodities between your home country and the US. The exchange must be traceable and identifiable, and the trade must be already in existence at the time you are applying for an E-1 visa. Then the next requirement is that the trade between the US and your home country must be substantial. And we will kind of discuss this in more detail a bit later. But this basically means that you must be trading with several clients. There must be kind of continuous flow of transactions between your home country and the US. But yeah, we'll discuss the substantiality requirement later in the webinar. The next requirement is that the trade must be international. So this means that if you are, for example, a national of Italy and you are trading with US but also like several other countries from all over the world, at least 50% of your international trade must be with the US. So this is the internationality requirement. The next requirement is that you must be coming to the US to engage in substantial trade. So this means that once you come to the US, you must have intent to kind of like manage and run the E-1 company. You cannot just come to the US and like, for example, retire here or, like not be kind of like associated with the business anymore. You must have like an active role in running the business. And then the last requirement is that you must have intent to return to your home country once your E-1 visa expires. But this is for an E-1 visa. This last requirement is pretty easy to meet. Usually we just submit like a signed declaration from the E-1 visa applicant that basically says that after the E-1 visa expires, the person plans to return to the home country. Usually, you wouldn't have to show things like ties to your home country and, evidence that you have like property there or like assets there, like you would for example, BE visa. So the standard for the E-1 visa is kind of much lower, and usually we would just submit the signed declaration.
Right, that is very helpful. So it really seems like the E-1 visa is good for individuals who already have a certain amount of trade going on between their home country and in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So with regards to what will qualify as trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And could you perhaps provide some examples of this trade?
Yeah, so basically, like any item that is commonly traded in international commerce can be an item of trade. So, for example, if you are selling, I don't know, like fabrics or furniture or materials or like clothes or any goods to clients, like all of those can be considered as item of trade. And also, interestingly, services can be considered as item of trade. So, for example, let's say that you have a consulting business in Canada. and then you're providing consulting services to clients from all over the world, but more than 50% of the services you are providing is to US clients. So those consulting services you are providing from Canada to the US clients, like those could be considered as trade as well. So service-oriented businesses can qualify for an E-1 visa as well.
So that is very interesting. I'm sure a lot of the audiences here would be happy to know that the definition of trade is quite broad and that services do qualify under this definition. Okay, so how would one prove that there is this substantial amount of trade between the home country and the United States?
Yeah, so usually we submit like an Excel spreadsheet for at least three most recent years that kind of details, that would kind of like list your clients and kind of like how many like invoices you issued to the clients like in each year. So we would submit that. We would submit like sample of invoices you issued. We could submit things like the company's tax returns showing that you have been taking revenue from clients. And if you are importing like material, like things to the US, we sometimes submit like the DHS, the CBP, customs documents as well as evidence that yes, you're like selling things to clients in the US. So these are some examples how we could show that there is an ongoing trade.
Right. So now let's perhaps talk a little bit about the quantum and the continuity of the trade. So how much trade would be enough trading activity? So what would be considered substantial? So for example, how many clients would the E-1 applicant need to have?
Yeah, so there is no kind of like clear definition in the regulation, like what is substantial trade and what amount is fine and how many clients are sufficient. So there is no kind of clear definition of that, but the substantial trade basically means that there must be a continuous flow of trade between the US and your home country. So what this means is that there must be like numerous trade exchanges between the US and your home country. Regarding the amount, I would say like the minimum, we would want to see is at least like 250,000, and regarding like the period of how long the trade must be ongoing, I would say at least 6 months. Like we wouldn't want to submit an application where you just started trading like a month ago because the consulate could kind of like push back on it. So I would say the minimum time is at least 6 months. The minimum amount in the kind of like the 6 month or last year would be at least 250,000. And regarding clients, again, like there is like no minimum in the regulation, but from like our experience, I would say like at least like 5-6 clients, like that would be the like an absolute minimum. And regarding like how many transactions, so we would want to see that let's say that you have, for example, like 5 clients. We wouldn't want to submit an application if you only had kind of like a one transaction with each client. So if you only issued like one invoice to each of the clients, even if the invoice was for like, I don't know, like $1 million, that would probably not be approved because, the consulate could argue that there is not like a continuous flow of the trade between your home country and the US, because you basically just had like 5 transactions with the clients in the past year. So we would want to, show that, you are kind of like frequently trading with the clients in the US. So yeah, we would want to see, we would want to submit like evidence that there are like, just kind of like ongoing, like numerous transactions with each client.
I see. So for example, if it is a consulting company and then there are 5 to 6 clients that the foreign company is providing services to, what if every month there was an invoice for continuing and continuing services? So let's say the client for each client, we would have like 12 invoices. Would that
Yeah,
be a
yeah, I
better
would
case?
say, yeah, that would be a better case, but even
Right.
more, just kind of like the more, the better. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Very helpful insights here. So can a small business ever qualify for an E-1 visa, or is this a category that is more suited to larger companies? What do you think?
Yeah, so a small business can definitely qualify, and the E-1 kind of the regulations state that as well, that a small business owner or a small business can qualify. And we have done E-1s for small businesses. But again, even if the kind of like the invoice amounts are on the smaller side, like we would still want to show that you have many clients, and there are like a lot of you are issuing like a lot of invoices, you are kind of like trading with the clients often. But yes, even if they're for like smaller amounts, you could qualify, but we would still want to kind of like show that you meet the other requirements as well.
Right. So in those cases, the important thing would be the volume of trade, the
Yeah,
frequency of trade, the continuing nature of the trade.
yeah,
That makes a
exactly.
lot of sense. Yeah. And so at the time that we prepare and apply for the E-1 visa application petition, must there already be trade going on?
Yes, and I actually get this question a lot at consultations. Someone wants to kind of like start trading, and they are asking if they can come to the US on the E-1 visa to kind of like start the trade. But the answer is, at the time we submit the E-1 application, we have to show that the trade is already ongoing. So as I mentioned earlier, we would want to see that the trade has been going on for at least, I would say, like 6 months. And if you need to come to the US and kind of like start the business and kind of like meet with clients and things like that, you can always, come as a B1 business visitor, because a B1 business visitor, you can do stuff like, I don't know, set up an entity, like meet with clients and things like that. So that can help you. And then, later you could apply for the E-1 visa.
Right. And how much percentage of the trade must be between the US and the foreign country?
Yeah, so at least 50% of your international trade must be between your home country and the US. So let's say that you are based, I don't know, in Canada, and you trade with US and China, Japan, and many, many other countries in the world. We would want to show that at least 50% of all the international trade is between your country and the US.
Right. And if there is any trade going on domestically within the country, would that be counted in this calculation?
Yeah, so interestingly, no. So the domestic trade doesn't count. So yeah, we would only want to show that 50% of the international trade, like with the other countries. So yeah, only the international trade is important here.
Great. So yeah, it really seems like the E-1 visa is appropriate if the majority of your international trade is with the United States.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so moving on to the practicalities of preparing for the E-1 visa petition, do clients need to submit a business plan usually with the E-1 petition?
Yeah, so business plan is not usually required, but I would say that in some cases it may be helpful. So for example, in cases when you just kind of like started the business and the trading has not been going on for too long. So for example, 6 months or 8 months or, like less than a year, I would say in those cases, it may be helpful to submit a business plan just to kind of, like show that and explain, how you'll be able to get additional clients, to include like your revenue projections and things like that. If you have a business that has been trading with the US for the last 10 years, then the business plan would not add any, like value to your application. But I would say that if your business is kind of like new and the trading has not been going on for too long, business plan may definitely be helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. So for newer trading activities, that would certainly be of help.
Yeah.
Right. And on an E-1 visa. So this can also be a distinction with the E-2 visa, which is for investors who are directing and developing a company. Do I need to hire any employees while I'm on the E-1 visa?
Yeah, so there is no, so for the E2 investor visa, there is a requirement that, you need to eventually hire US employees. There is no such requirement for the E1 visa. I will say that, if you already have employees in the US or you do plan to hire employees, it will definitely, be helpful for your application because, if you can show to the consulate that your business will be employing US employees, that's kind of definitely helpful, but it's not required.
That is very good to know. And do I need to make any monetary investments to qualify for the E-1 visa?
Yeah, so again, no, and this is an advantage of the E1 visa. So for the E2 visa, you have to make a substantial investment. For the E1 visa, there is no such requirement. So I would say like usually people will still invest like some money when they are kind of like setting up the activities in the US, but it's not required to make the investment.
Another very important distinction there. And is there also an ownership requirement of a US entity for the E-1 visa compared to the E-2 visa?
Yeah, so interestingly, so for the E1 visa, there is it's not required that there is kind of like a US entity. So for example, if you have a entity in your foreign country, it's not required that you actually have an entity in the US. Many people usually set up like a branch, of like in the US for like employment purposes and tax purposes and things like that. But and then yes, they would need to kind of own it, but it's not required even that there is an entity in the US for the E1 visa.
Another great advantage that we mentioned here. Okay, so maybe we can move on to talk a little bit about what are the common reasons why an E1 visa application could be denied.
Yeah, so I would say the first reason may be that the trade amount is just too low. So let's say that your company has been like trading with the US for the past 3 years, but the trade has always been just around like, I don't know, like 50 to $100,000. That amount is just kind of too low. So that might be one reason for denial. Another reason for denial may be that you just have a very few clients in the US. So for example, if you only have like two or three clients, again, the consulate may argue that the trade is just not substantial because you don't have enough clients. Another reason may be that there are just not enough, as we already mentioned, not enough kind of like transactions, like the volume of trade is just too low. So that may be another reason. Another reason may be that the volume of trade like with the US is just too low. So if the trade you are doing with the US is below 50% of your international trade, then you would just not meet the E1 visa requirements, and then the E1 visa would be denied. And also, as we already mentioned, like if the E1, if the trade is not existing at the time you are applying, or is just kind of like you just recently started trading with the US, then that may be another reason for denial. So there may be more like kind of like depending, more reasons for denial, like depending on the kind of like specifics of your application. But I would say like these are some of the common ones.
Right. And to avoid these, it would be good to make sure that you have at least 6 months, as we've discussed a little earlier, of continuous trade activity before you try to
Yeah, I
apply.
would say like 6 months is like the absolute minimum, and even in
Right.
that case, we would want to show that even then, like you have a lot of clients, like the trade, like the volume of trade is high. Yeah, I would say like the 6 months is
The bare
minimum.
minimum.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so now maybe we can talk a little bit about renewals. So what would someone need to show if they already had an E-1 visa before and they would like to renew the visa to continue their activities?
Yeah, so you would have to show that you still meet all the E-1 visa requirements. So, you would want to show that there is still kind of like a substantial trade going on between your home country and the US, that you have a lot of clients, the volume of trade is high, still that the majority of your international trade is with the US. So you would want to still show that you still meet all the requirements. To kind of like show that you would be submitting evidence such as the company's tax returns, spreadsheets showing who are your clients, how many transactions you had with each client, what was the dollar value of each transaction, invoices you issue to the client, like CBP, the kind of the entry documents if you're importing goods to the US, companies' bank statements. There are like many ways how you can show that the trade is, has been kind of like ongoing since you got the initial E-1. But I would recommend to always check kind of like the website of the consulate where you will be applying for the renewal, because each consulate has kind of like specific requirements and kind of like specific things they want to see. So I would definitely check that, and because they may want to see like specific types of documents.
I see. Very good point. Okay, so on a more broader scale, so would you say the E-1 visa is better than the E-2 visa? I think that is a question that we get a lot from clients.
Yeah, I think if so not all obviously like not all companies or not all individuals will kind of like qualify both for E-1 and E-2, because if you, for example, just kind of like have a company in the US and the company is only dealing with US clients, then E-1 visa would not be even like an option for you, unless you decided to kind of like start exporting like goods or providing services from the US to your home country. So in some cases, like the E-1 visa, would not even be an option. But in some cases, for example, if you have a company in the US and the company, has been, I don't know, like exporting like materials to your home country, and you would be like meeting the E-1 visa requirements, then, we may be thinking like, yes, you could qualify for an E-1 visa and an E-2 visa as well. So, so I would say like many people, if the business can qualify for both, many people prefer the E-1 visa, just because you don't have to show that you made an investment in the US. So
Right.
I would say like for the E-2 visa, usually kind of like the absolute minimum, I mean, it will depend on your business, but the absolute minimum we would want to show that you invested is around like $45,000, and that is not required for the E-1. So there is like one advantage. People may prefer the E-1 visa. Also, you don't have to have employees if you apply for an E-1 visa, and you don't even need to kind of like plan to have employees in the future. So that is another kind of like thing, if some people, if they just kind of like if they don't plan to hire like many employees in the future, that they may just go ahead with the E-1 visa. So yeah, I would say like if you qualify for both, the E-1 just has those two main advantages, like you don't need to make the investment in the US, and the E-1 company doesn't need to employ you as employees. So that's why, many people prefer the E-1 over the E-2.
Right. So the E-1 could be preferable in those situations, but the company must meet all the other requirements regarding substantial trade, and that may be a little rare to find because of the stringent requirements there. Right. Okay. So what about bringing the applicant's family to the US? If the principal applicant has an E-1 visa, what are the options available for the person's family?
Yeah, so you can, on the E-1 visa, you can bring your spouse, and your spouse can also work in the US, and then you can bring your children that are unmarried and under the age of 21, so they can all come with you to the US on the E-1 visa.
Great. So I'm sure that could be a great option for people. All right. So I think now we can spend some time on the questions that we have from our audience. We can perhaps go from top to bottom. Okay, so one question from Mohammed: how much should be the turnover requirement? Turnover. After how many days can I apply if I am in the US? So there are a lot of questions here. Can I travel outside from the US if my status change is approved from the US? Okay, so there's a lot of questions here, but maybe we can discuss the most general ones. So turnover, and I'm assuming that that's regarding the trade volume.
Yeah, I think it's the volume of the trade. So yeah, as we discussed, I think like the minimum we would want to show is like $250,000. Yeah, and I think we can maybe just because it's asking about like change of status, so maybe we can discuss more broadly like what are the options, how you can apply for an E-1. So one option is to apply for an E-1 visa at a consulate, and then the second option is to apply for a change of status with USCIS in the US. But if you apply for a change of status, and if the change of status is approved, that would only give you, so the approval would be for a maximum period of 2 years, and that would only allow you to stay in the US. So the moment you would leave the US, you would need to apply for an E-1 visa in your home country. So I think there was one of the questions as well, like after how many years can I go home? So you can go, you can go home at any point. You would just need to apply for an E-1 visa at a consulate in your home country to be able to come back to the US.
Right. Very helpful to know that change of status is an option, but if you change your status and you leave the country after that, then you do need a visa to enter the US again.
Yeah, exactly.
Trip. Right. Okay, so why don't we move on to the next question? I was of the opinion that one would like to have the E-1 visa to establish more clients in the USA. I am an exporter of leather products to the USA with 2 to 3 clients and with trade volumes of about 130K to 140K a year with the US, but with other countries too. Do you think I should go for it?
Yeah, so like you can definitely apply for the E-1 visa and then kind of like grow your business like once you have the E-1 visa. I would just say, so here I think the trade, like the volume of the trade, like the trade amount is like on the kind of like on the lower side, and you first have to get through the hurdle of getting the E-1 visa. So I would say in this scenario, I would maybe like wait a little bit longer to kind of like increase the trade amounts and maybe even the amount of clients, and then apply for the visa at a consulate, just because I think with the kind of like the numbers and the numbers of clients in as written here, the consulate may just kind of like push back and argue that the trade is not substantial yet. So I would maybe wait a bit longer, and once you get like more clients and the kind of like the trade numbers increase as well, then you can apply for the E-1.
And that makes a lot of sense. And as you said earlier, the B1 business visitor visa could be an option for this person to be able to do some business development activities before the trade volume and number of clients gets to the level that will be comfortable to apply for the E1 visa. Okay. The next question we have is about licensing. Should I apply before opening a branch office in the US or after opening a branch office? And Michaela, you mentioned that having an entity in the US is actually not a requirement to be approved for the E1 visa.
Yeah, so I would say like the licensing, so just kind of, yeah, I'm not, the licensing is just kind of, you know, each type of, you know, like business or, you know, each industry has kind of like its own licensing requirements. I would say, should I apply before opening a branch office or after opening a branch office? So yeah, I think we would just need to like know more details, like is the company you are trading with like currently kind of like set up abroad and that company is trading with the US clients, like if that's you know, if that's the scenario, you know, you you could apply even before kind of like setting up a branch, but I'm just not clear like what's the scenario here.
Right.
But yeah, it's yeah, for E1 there doesn't even have to be, as we mentioned, an entity you know, in the US, but many people just kind of like prefer to set up like a branch or you know, something for you know, like employment or tax purposes.
Right. Okay. Can an E1 trader trade in multiple goods or trade in different fields?
Yeah, so this is absolutely fine. Like you know, there is like no limitation, so you can, yeah, trade in like multiple different like industries. Like that's, yeah, that's completely fine.
Right. And we do have questions kind of filling in here. Okay, let's see this one. I have only done a client. So this person, I think, is saying that they have a client relationship for about, with a volume of trade about 45K, and then another client with 370K in the trade volume. So with that number of clients, could this person apply for an E1 visa?
Yeah, so it seems that there are only like two you know, two clients so far. Yeah, like I would, you know, so for that's again goes back to like the substantiality requirement.
Right.
So you know, two clients, I think the consulate, you know, would push back and argue that the substantiality requirement was not met because there are just you know, two clients. So I would wait until you have you know, more clients. I would say that the amounts like itself, like 370 plus 45, like that's over 400,000, like the amounts you know, themselves are fine, but we would just want to show that you have like more clients. And also I don't know from the hypo, like how many transactions are there, you know, like per year, but we would also want to show that, you know, there is just kind of like that continuous flow of trade. Like it's not just that there was like one invoice for 45 and another for 370, but we would just want to show that the kind of like the trade is ongoing.
Exactly. Very, very helpful. Okay, and for the business plan, we already answered this question. Basically, it is it could be a helpful addition if your trade is on the relatively newer side. But if you have already been trading for 10 years, it may not be necessary. Okay, so, and this one. Okay, and this one is a comment here. Okay, last question we have. I am providing my IT services to one client since 2 years. They send payments on a monthly basis. Yearly trading volume is around 175K. Should I go for it?
Yeah, so I think here again, because there is only one client, I think the concern of either a consulate or USCIS would be that you know, if you're only providing services to one client, like that more resembles, you know, they may argue that you should get like an employment-based visas because you are, you know, only working
Right.
for one client. So the E-1 visa, you know, the government really wants to see that the trade is substantial. You know, you are dealing kind of like with like many clients. There are many transactions. The trade, you know, is substantial. So I think with the one client, you know, I would definitely like wait to get more clients, because you know, the amount itself, like 175, like if you could raise it a little bit, like the amount itself, you know, is not bad. It's just the fact that there is only one client. You know, I think the consulate would most likely, you know, conclude that the trade is just not substantial.
Right. Very helpful. And we have discussed before the number that you want to aim for is 5 to 6 clients, and that would be the minimum, right?
Yeah, I would say the minimum. And I would say like even in these kind of like borderline cases, you know, if you only have like 5 clients, or if the trade is like around like 200,000, you know, those are the cases where submitting a business plan with your application would be, you know, helpful, because in that business plan, you know, and especially if you're kind of like the business has been is kind of new, you know, you have been only kind of like doing it for like, I don't know, 2 years. So then in the business plan, you know, you would explain what are your activities in the future, like what are your marketing strategies, like how do you plan to get more clients, like how do you plan to increase the you know, the kind of like the trade amount. So in those kind of cases, you know, the business plan definitely would be helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And again, yeah, I
yeah.
think there was like a question, like if you raise the amount to
Right.
250, but one client. So again, you know, I think the kind of like the main concern here of the consulate would be that they would just say, like, if you only want to provide services to one client, you know, then the client should kind of like sponsor you for like an employment-based visa, such as, I don't know, like TN or H1B,
Right.
because the relationship between you and one client it just kind of like resembles employment. But the
Right.
E-1 visa is kind of like for you know, either individuals or companies that deal with multiple clients and engage in substantial trade with multiple clients. So yeah, I think you would still need to raise the amount of clients you have.
All right, very helpful insights. Thank you so much, Michaela, for your time. I don't believe we have any other outstanding questions. I'm sure that this session has been helpful for many of our attendees, and I certainly learned a lot from your experience. So thank you very much for your time. And for everyone who attended, thank you again for being here. If you signed up for our webinars, you will be getting all the materials and a link to schedule a consultation, as I introduced earlier. So we look forward to interacting more with some of you, and please feel free to sign up for future upcoming webinars on the E-1 visa and other topics, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, as we do have many other videos on immigration law topics. Okay, everybody, so have a great and wonderful day, and I will see you all later.
Thank you, everyone.